Hi class, this is Mrs. Cornett. I'm going to show you some more examples from section 3.2. This is the second video, so if you've not watched the first one, go back and watch that first. This one I'm going to show you equations with fractions, and it gets a little harder. And so, yeah, make sure you've done that first video first. Now, I've done a screenshot of your textbook. We will not solve all of these, but you have the answers posted on Moodle. I just want to show you a few of these and how we're going to solve these that have fractions. Okay, take a look at number 32. Actually, 31 and 32, we're going to solve those slightly different than the rest of them. Because 31 and 32 is a fraction equals a fraction, you can actually use a method called cross multiplying. In our next section, 3.3, or maybe it's 3.4, I can't remember. But anyway, in a section soon, we will do a lot more of these proportions. But since it's on here, let me just go ahead and show you, just in case it shows up on WebAssign. Notice the other problems, 33 through 42, it's not in that specific order, fraction equals fraction. Okay, to cross multiply, a lot of times I put an X directly over the equal sign, and that connects the two numbers that I need to multiply. So the 8x is connected with the 3, and so 8x times 3 is 24x. The 9 and the 2 are also connected. We multiply that to get 18. Next, divide both sides by 24. X equals 18 over 24th. This is not your final answer because it's not in most simplest form. I think WebAssign would count this wrong. And I don't want you to pull out your calculator and change it into a decimal. I want you just to reduce this by the greatest common factor, which would be 6. 18 divided by 6 is 3. 24 divided by 6 is 4. And so the complete and final answer is the fraction 3/4. Okay, let's move on to number 33. This is 5x over 4 plus 1/2 equals 0. The way I like to solve these problems is to work with this method called clearing the fractions. I just think it's easier to solve these equations if they're whole numbers and not fractions. The first thing I want you to do is look at the two denominators, which are 4 and 2, and what would be a common denominator? Well, 4 would be a common denominator. But instead of just rewriting those fractions using their common denominators, I want you to multiply every term in the entire equation, both sides, by a common denominator. And so I want you to multiply the first one times 4, the second one times 4, and then the last one by 4. Now I just put 4 in parentheses up by the numerator because 4 is a whole number. It's the fraction 4 over 1. And so I'm really just going to be multiplying it to the numerators. 4 times 5x is 20x over 4, plus 4 times 1 is 4 over 2 equals 4 times 0 is 0. Now, we still have fractions, so what's going on? Do you see that we can simplify these fractions to whole numbers? 20 over 4 can be simplified to 5x. 4 over 2 can simplify to 2, and then we have 0. Now we just solve that very easy equation by subtracting 2 on both sides and then divide by 5. And so your answer is negative 2/5. And before I switch to another problem, let me show you a shortcut that we could have taken. If you go back to this original problem that I'm kind of boxing in green here, before we multiplied the red 4 times the 5, you could also cancel those 4s. And do you see if you canceled the 4s, you would just be left with this 5x. Then if you go to the next term, the red 4 could cancel with the blue 2 here in the denominator, and that would leave a 2 behind. And then do you see 2 times 1 is just a positive 2? And then of course 4 times 0 will always be 0. But do you see what I have here in orange? I have a 5x that's left over, a positive 2 left over, and a 0. And that's exactly what I ended up with after I simplified fractions. Let me show you another one, and I think it will start making sense. Number 37, x over 5 minus x over 2 equals 1. The first step is to determine what the common denominator would be between just those two fractions. Common denominator would be 10. And so instead of changing the denominators to 10, I want you to multiply each term in the equation by 10. The reason we can do that is because it is an equation, and as long as we multiply 10 by every piece, it still remains the same equation. Okay, I'm going to show you what I just did on the previous problem. So instead of multiplying 10 times x, I'm going to first simplify the 10 in the numerator with the 5 in the denominator. And so 10 divided by 5 is 2. I'm left with a 2, but there was already an x in the numerator. And so now it's just the number 2x. And then we have our subtraction sign. I'm going to do the same thing with the 10 in the numerator, the 2 in the denominator. 10 divided by 2 is 5. Again, there was already an x, so this is 5x equals 10 times 1 is 10. Now if we collect like terms, since both of these have an x, this will be negative 3x equals 10. Divide both sides by negative 3, and x equals negative 10 thirds. So do you see that if we follow the method of clearing the fractions, it's a whole lot easier to solve these equations. They're not nearly as intimidating if you can really start to catch on to this method called clearing the fractions. Take a look at 41. It's 3x plus 1/4 equals 3/4. This one already has common denominators. You could work this one out just by subtracting 1/4 from both sides. I still prefer just to clear out the fractions, and so that's what I'm going to do. The common denominator is 4, so I'm going to multiply the whole number 4 to each term. 4 times 3x is 12x. The next term, the red 4 in the numerator, there was only a 1 there, and if we multiplied by a 4, do you see that 4 over 4 would cancel? It would simplify to 1, and there was already a 1 there, so it's just plus 1 is left over. And then the 4 in the numerator after the equal sign and the 4 in the denominator also cancel, but it leaves behind that 3 that was originally there. And so now you have the equation 12x plus 1 equals 3, and that's a whole lot easier to solve than its original format. Subtract 1 from both sides, 12x equals 2, divide both sides by 12, and x equals 2/12, but you need to reduce that by 2, so the final answer is x equals 1/6. Okay, I'm going to show you 39, although okay, let me show you one more on this video. First, I'll point out 39 and 40. I won't show you problems like that. Those are a little too difficult for the level of math that you're at right now. If you're interested, stop by my office and I can show you how to do these problems. But let me pick one more off of this page before this video gets too much longer. 36 is y over 6 minus 5/8 equals 2. First, determine the common denominator between 6 and 8. An easy way to find common denominators is just to multiply 6 times 8. That's 48, which is okay. It's just a bigger number than it has to be. Another one that's a little bit smaller would be 24. Both of those numbers go into 24 evenly. And so that's what I'm going to use for this video. I'm going to multiply each part by the whole number 24. Remember, it would be 24 over 1, but there's no need to put the 1 in the denominator. Okay, so before I multiply this 24 and 6 in the denominator, that's going to simplify to a 4y. Next, the fraction 5 over 8, the 24 in the numerator before I even multiply it by the 5, because it's easier to see that it simplifies if you don't multiply it first. The 24 and the 8 simplifies to a 3, but there was already a 5 there, and so you need to multiply 5 times 3, which is 15. And then this gets tricky, guys, because you see the 2 that I have written there in black, and you see the 24, and you want to simplify that to 12, but don't. Okay, it's 24 over 1 times 2 over 1, and that is just 48. Those are two whole numbers sitting there. Okay, now we have the equation 4y minus 15 equals 48. Let's continue to solve it by adding 15 to both sides. 4y equals 63. Going to move it up here. Divide both sides by 4. Y equals the fraction 63/4, and they do not share a common term, so we can't simplify it. And you do not need to switch that to a mixed number. You don't need to switch it to a decimal. You can type it in just as it is as an improper fraction, 63/4. Okay, guys, that's all for this video. Please let me know if you have any questions.